Getting your final mix or master or even production to sound ultra wide while it still has phase alignment and it doesn't sound chaotic can be one of the harder things to do, and it's something that I don't see a lot of people talk about. So in this video, I want to go over one technique that you could use at the end of your process to add just a little bit of width, and then that kind of opens up your mixes and your masters and allows every element to have a little bit more breathing room. It widens the stereo image a little bit, but it's not really disorienting and chaotic, and it's not going to ruin your phase alignment. So we're going to hop into Cubase and check that out in 1 second. But before we do, my name's Austin. You're watching Make Pop Music, where we have weekly production tutorials. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe because that helps us out a ton. And after the video, if you want to support us, you can head over to our website, makepopmusic.com, and check out all of the cool stuff we have over there. We have a bunch of free content. We have some paid content if you want to support that. So definitely head over there after this video and check that out. But let's dive into Cubase so I can show you the technique to open up your mixes and masters just a little bit. Let's talk about this technique that you can use to take your mixes and your masters to the next level and add a little bit of width, and it is called mid-side EQ. So you may have heard of mid-side EQ before. We've talked about it on our channel. I know other channels have talked about it as well, and it's something that is super prevalent at an individual source level, so using it on something like a synth patch or a guitar patch. And it's really, really useful when you use it on something like a bus. So if I use it on all of my synths to carve out a little bit of mids to make room for a vocal, that's a technique that's really, really common. However, recently I've started doing it on my master, and when you do it on your master, you want to use it a little bit more sparingly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to actually set some settings for mid-side EQ, but before we do that, let's talk about what mid-side EQ even is. So I'm going to pull up ProQ. This is not the tool that we're going to actually be using when we start setting our settings. However, this is a little easier for me to show you and for me to display what mid-side EQ even is. So in ProQ, as you probably know, like any other kind of visual parametric EQ, you can boost frequencies, you can cut frequencies. But one thing that I don't see a lot of people doing is changing this right here. So if you hit this drop-down knob, you can change your stereo placement, and you can either affect the right side independently or the left side independently, or what we're going to be focusing on, the mids and the sides independently. So if I switch this to mids, take a listen to what this does. This is only going to take away these frequencies, so let's say 2 dB at 2300. It's only going to remove that out of the middle of the stereo field, so it's going to leave the sides completely untouched. We're going really dramatic with it so you can hear it. Let's switch this to sides and hear how different that sounds. The pieces that you're talking to. I'm a little manic, but I'll tell the truth. I think I fell for you. Maybe I'm pathetic, but it's after two. I'm a little drunk and not a... So using mid-side EQ is a really, really nice way to go in and kind of finesse your mix or your master and tighten things up in the middle of the stereo spectrum or operate things independently on the sides of the stereo spectrum, just to give you a little bit more fine-tune when you're trying to get that balance of mid to side. One of the things that you can kind of keep in mind when you're using mid-side EQ is, psychoacoustically speaking, the louder that the sides are, the wider the mix is going to feel. So using something like a mid-side EQ and boosting a lot of stuff on the sides is going to add volume on that side, and that's going to in turn make that mix seem a little bit wider. So let's just do a quick example with ProQ, so if you're using that to follow along, you can kind of hear. This is going to be pretty drastic, so don't really pay attention to how good the mix ends up sounding. Just pay attention to how different it ends up sounding. So what we could do is we could cut out some sides right over here around like 70, 80 hertz, because let's say we don't really need that on the sides. We're going to boost some sides over here at like the 3K and the kind of high mids at 1K. And then let's go ahead and let's take away a little bit of the mids. Yeah, there we go. And let's kind of take those away where we're boosting these sides, just to kind of see if we can change the entire balance of this mix. So let's go ahead and listen now. Here's without. Maybe I'm pathetic, but it's after two. I'm a little drunk and not a barbecue. Would you come on over? So that's a quick kind of run and gun explanation on what mid-side EQ is and how to use that in a tool that you might be familiar with. However, when I'm doing my mixes lately, I've been using this MusEQ Master, and this just comes in the Plugin Alliance bundle. This is not a sponsored video or anything like that. However, this is available on their subscription model. It's pretty easily accessible, and I really, really like this plugin for mixes and masters because you can either operate this on left-right mode, or you can click that button and you can operate this on mid-side mode. And when you've engaged that, what's going to happen is you've got your mids over here. So this is going to do any of your boost and cuts in the middle of that stereo spectrum. and this is going to operate the sides. And it works pretty similarly to what we were just doing in ProQ. However, it's a totally different graphic interface. You can link them, so if you make an adjustment on one, it's going to make that on the other. However, for mid-side, we don't really want that. We want these to kind of operate independently. So we have mid-side mode engaged, we have link off, and then what you have over here is you have your trim knobs. So you can trim the mids. Let me drag that down. And then you can do that also with the sides. So what I like to do is I'll just turn everything down just to make sure that we can kind of add some EQ and it's not going to overload whatever comes after this. It's not going to mess up our gain staging. So right here we have a limiter. So I'm going to turn the middle down like 3 dB. And then what I like to do is just kind of a rule of thumb on mid-side processing is let's have the mids between a dB to maybe like a dB and a quarter louder. So if this is at -3, let's try this at like -1.8. And that's automatically going to make this mix feel a little bit wider because we have more energy coming from the sides. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and actually start operating on frequencies. So in this EQ with the lows, you can either operate this as a shelf or as like a cut. We're going to leave that as it is. And then there's also these over here. So if you see on the bottom, the middle, the top, you've got the first little module right here. And what that's going to do is that's going to change the slope of the boost or cut that you're doing. And then this second button on each module is going to swap between a boost or a cut. So if you have it turned off, this is going to boost by however many dB. If you engage that and you see that glowing red, it's going to cut by however many dB. So you can operate this as a boost and cut EQ. So let's go ahead and let's start working. What I'm going to do now is let's just boost a little bit of the middle. Let's boost like a dB, dB and a half. Let's just do 2 in the middle and see what we feel. And then what we can do here is let's go ahead and let's cut out some of these lows. Let's cut out like 3 or 4 dB of, let's just say like 80, 70 hertz. And what that's going to do is that's just going to kind of tighten up the mid because you're not going to have so much low end information coming in from the sides. So we're going to go ahead and cut that right there. And I know we're coming in a little bit quieter right now because we've gain staged, but as we start boosting things and cutting things, it's going to make a huge difference in the end. So I'm going to leave that as it is for now, but just pay attention to that as we turn it on and off. The next thing that I like to start doing is I like to start focusing on the sides. So I kind of want a little bit more kind of low mid coming in on the side. So let's go ahead and boost that by like a dB and a half. Let's go ahead and boost some top end. So let's do like 1K by like a dB, dB and a half. And right here, this is where we're going to really start to make it shine. So let's go with something like 5K and boost by a few dB. And then let's go up to here like 17, 15K, boost by a couple dB. And let's hear how different this sounds now. So we've got that width. Now we just need to get a little bit of beef back in the mid. What we're going to do now is we're just going to start kind of boosting everything right here. So let's go in here. We're going to boost, I want to say, let's boost like 500 in the middle. That's a nice kind of thick frequency that will kind of add a little bit of density to the mix. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we're just going to add quite a bit of top end to kind of match what we did on the sides because I don't want it so dramatically different. And let's hear something like this. And that's kind of my go-to technique of just setting frequencies. So I'm going to mess around with all of these a little bit off of camera, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you exactly what I landed on, and then we'll do a before and after so you can hear how this mid-side processing really affects this entire mix. Here's what I ended up landing on. So we're doing like 4 dB at 50, and then we engaged this Q knob right here. So we are doing 1.5 dB at 113, 2.5 dB at 358, 2 dB at like 5100. And then this is actually really surprising. It just sounded really good. We're boosting like 5.5 dB at 13. And that's all operating on the middle of the stereo spectrum. And then over here, we're cutting, I think I had it at like -4.5. I just dragged it up to C. But we have this at -4.5. That's taken away just some of those mids at like 81. We don't really need that on the side. And then we're just boosting a little bit around here at 400. Boosting about 2 dB at 500, boosting about 2 dB at 2300, and boosting about 5 dB at 5600. So let's go ahead and let's kind of hear this now.
picking up the pieces that you tore into. I'm a little mad, but I'll tell the truth. I think I fell for you. Maybe I'm pathetic, but it's after two. I'm a little drunk and not a bottle's used. Would you come on over if I call?
And now with all of those settings that I've dialed in, I kind of adjusted the mids independently, adjusted the sides independently, and then I used these little trim knobs over here just to make sure that I like the new balance between the mid and the side. And to me, that opens up everything. The mix sounds a little bit brighter. It sounds a little bit more open. The low end sounds a little bit more solid and consistent. And we have a stereo spectrum that I feel like is really, really balanced. And I can hear the vocals, I can hear the synths, I can hear the hi-hats, and I can hear everything just a hair more. So it's one of those things of, you know, when you're mixing a song or mastering a song, adding that nice little 10%, 5% difference can really make your client or your artist feel like, wow, this sounds extremely different. Let's go ahead and listen to one more before and after before we go, and then we're going to wrap this up. Here's before any processing.
Calling you, picking up the pieces that you tore into. I'm a little mad, but I'll tell the truth. I think I fell for you. Maybe I'm pathetic, but it's after two. I'm a little drunk and not a bottle's used. Would you come on over if I call the truth?
I mean, it's like a night and day difference on those vocals. Those vocals really come out of the mix, they pop, and everything just feels a little bit less claustrophobic and cluttered. So hopefully showing you some of these processes with mid-side EQ can be a really cool way to implement that into your mixing or your mastering or even your production. Always remember that every sound is going to have so much stereo information. You've got sound at the middle, you've got sound all the way to the left, all the way to the right, and then everywhere in between. And if you can kind of figure out some tools and techniques to kind of operate some of those areas independently or finesse certain things in certain areas of your mix, I think you can get a lot more kind of mileage out of your mix. So try this technique. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Let us know what videos you want to see in the future. And if you like this video, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe because that helps out our channel a ton. But that's going to do it for this week. We'll be back next week with much more content. Much love. Peace.